Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we're going to return to one of our favorite subjects, the local arts scene. Our guests tonight are the co-directors of Petite Opera Company, and we have with us tonight Susan Boschke and Steve Arvanitis. Susan, Steve, welcome back to the show. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
So what's new and exciting in the world of Petite Opera?
Oh, all kinds of fun stuff. We found out that we are going to be doing the Chicago premiere of a new libretto, which means the text and the concept have changed, for a version of Così fan tutte by Mozart, which translates to everybody is just the same.
Now isn't there a certain sort of outrageousness or in taking a classical text like that and rewriting it and changing it? I mean, is that hubris of some sort, or is that perfectly acceptable?
I think it's more accepted in the comic circles than it is in the dramatic circles.
There's no doubt.
But it's interesting because when this was originally written in the 1700s, and it was not done for quite a while after that. Then it was picked up again. So,
but it is a comedy. I mean,
it is a comedy.
Initially,
so
yes,
it is.
Work,
it was
right?
initially a comedy, and still is a comedy in this version, and probably even more so a comedy in this version, I think. It's interesting because it's set in modern times. So our mission is really to make everybody an opera lover, and a lot of people haven't seen them before. So if you can bring in today's themes and something they can really relate to, then it's going to be a better experience for everybody. And
so people don't relate back to the 17th, 18th century that easily?
Sometimes.
Is that what you find?
Yes.
Generally not.
If they've never seen one before, I would say probably less
especially
so.
1700s Europe. You don't see too much of that here.
Yeah. Yes, it's not readily apparent as you walk down the streets of Chicago.
That's right.
Yeah, but Mozart is timeless anyway. But this particular one, it's a Chicago native originally, who now lives in California. His name is Dimitri Toscas, and
sounds like a good name for.
He's a nice Greek boy,
Greek boy
from Chicago,
right.
And he has basically taken the concept that this is originally based on a bet between two guys who are dating sisters, and their boss challenges them in this version that I make you a bet that if you left town, that they wouldn't remain faithful to you.
Your women would desert you.
Your women would desert you.
Because you're not so special.
You're not so special.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah, and the original concept of the show is set up thus that the boss, so to speak, wants to convince that the two guys that the women are not going to be faithful no matter what.
Right.
So if you disappear out of the scene, it doesn't matter who comes in to replace you. They're going to go and follow the next guy.
Right, because he's very cynical.
Apparently.
Yes, so he wants to pass on his cynicism to
Or
the
prove
next
his
generation.
cynicism, right?
Yeah,
Prove
exactly.
the cynicism.
Right, exactly.
And this updated version, it just tightens up some of the relationships between all the different characters in the show.
Yeah.
So would Mozart complain that his characters needed tightening? Is there
No,
I think
he would.
he'd
I
totally
think he
be in
would look
with
at
it.
this and say, "Oh my God, this is fantastic."
Yeah, he was very forward-thinking, I think, more so than the average person during that time
Well,
frame.
and you mentioned before the show that this new version is set in Chicago.
Yes.
Which I think is really interesting. So how do you translate something from 17th century Europe into 1950s, did you say? 50s era Chicago?
1959.
Late 50s.
Yes,
Late
59.
50s.
So the original, the two girls have a servant named Espina, and the boss in our version was an older friend of theirs who's just basically passing on his earthly wisdom. But you don't really get the connection of how they met or that they're all from the same environment. It's just kind of loose, all right? So there are 6 main characters, basically. The 2 sisters, the 2 guys, the boss person, and then the servant. In this version, they all work at the same company. So it plays out
That's
very well.
where I was
That's
driving at by
tighten up.
tightening it
Right.
up.
So everyone knows everyone else.
Everyone
in
knows
this.
Everybody
everybody,
knows
right.
everybody. So the one character's the boss. The two guys work for him. The two girls are in the secretarial pool, and they work for the servant from the original one. She's the boss in this
Yeah, she's
one.
not a servant in this
No,
version.
she's the
She's
boss.
Right.
she's the girl's boss.
Yes,
Right.
okay.
So everybody knows everybody, and it's he said it in. They all work in the Playboy building. They don't work for Playboy, but they
But
work
they're
in the
building.
In the
Playboy
building.
Right.
Right.
So you can kind of get a picture of exactly where it's happening.
And that was the height of Playboy's popularity.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Early 60s.
It, wa-
right.
it, wa-
Exactly.
it was the building to work in downtown.
So the in the original, the girls, the one sister, which it's never stated, but it's like the older sister. You kind of think of her that way, is more very staunchly, firmly entrenched. Kind of like stand by your man, almost kind of a personality. And the younger sister's a little more easily swayed. And then the guys kind of match their girls to a certain extent, but it's not as defined. in the
Not as
original.
defined.
Not as this is. So in this version, the older sister and her guy are the more conservative, but we have them with one foot planted firmly in the 1950s. And the other pair is one foot planted firmly in the 1960s.
And
So you
that's
have conservative versus, so it's on the brink of the sexual revolution. And you have two totally different things, but yet they all get along and they all work in the same building. And then you have the boss character, who in the original character name is Don Alfonso. And in this version, his name is Al Fonzarello. So it works very well. And then Despina is the servant.
Or in this case, the boss. But,
The boss in this case, and her name is Ms. Desi in this version.
okay.
And she also moonlights as a jazz singer. So there's some interesting stuff. So
So do you do any jazz singing in the course of this opera?
there will be jazz singing in the course of
Okay.
the opera, yes.
Again,
And
Mozart would, being the progressive
think-
guy that he was, would think this would
I
be
think he
okay.
would like
I think he would enjoy it,
Yeah.
and I think it's something that he would have realized that it's different from how he originally envisioned it, but he liked it. He would just like the change. He's like,
Yeah.
I see how this works.
Exactly, because he was very into topical thematic of the time, too, as far as how he treated the characters.
Well, I think that we, as modern audiences, we lose sight of some of that in these classical pieces that we see, whether they're opera or Shakespearean theater or even the Greek classics, were very contemporary pieces in their time. And we
Right.
think of them somehow now as being frozen in stone, and you can't mess with them in any
Right,
way.
right.
But even if we go back to the Greek tragedies and Greek comedies, they were very topical, and they were making fun of the leaders of Athens back then,
Right.
2,000
Yeah.
years ago. So who's to say that you can't take an older piece?
Well, exactly.
make it more
And I think there is a balance there, and you have to do it from an educated standpoint. One, you have to know your audience. But I think there's an awful lot of risk-taking going on where they're changing it just to change it without changing it for a reason. So I'm against that. We've seen a couple productions like that it just kind of turned me off. That it's just like they wanted to make their mark on it, not necessarily that it was really the audience in mind.
Let's do this to be outrageous rather than
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. So
accomplish
there's a
particular
fair amount
effect.
of that going on. This does not fall in that classification at all. It's the text is all changed from the original, but like in the original, the guys, their reason to go away for a couple days is they're told that they're going off to war, that they've been drafted into they're soldiers and they're going to be gone. In this one, they're going to be transferred to New York. So I mean, there are certain plays in it that just work. And I haven't seen anything in the script that doesn't tie out somehow. He's very, very talented
very,
guy.
and very faithful to the spirit of the original.
Yeah,
And-
exactly. The only thing that's different is outside of the contextual setting of it, I guess, is that in the original version, there's debate. Do the girls know they're being played or don't they? And most interpretations that have been done lately, and even just like 6 or 7 years ago, was a big Mozart birthday. So a lot of people were doing this production. Most people are saying they don't know and that they're the victim of the whole thing. So some of the women are like, I don't like that part of it. So this, they know. They figure it out and they play them right back. So it's got twist upon twist upon twist, and it's really, really fun.
Actually, it sounds very inviting.
And
Yeah.
and for a change of pace, since it's not the guys driving the story, and it's really the girls are are driving, how the guys react, they don't know how to react, and they're like, "We're not expecting this. How do I get through this? Why is it going this way when I want it to go that way?"
Exactly. So it's very funny. They're all very sure of themselves that they're going to win the bet, and the girls aren't going to be bet, and so they play them for all it's worth. So it's just very fun. So
they count their chickens before they're hatched, as they say.
You're sure. It actually does sound like a great setup for a story like that. Even though there wouldn't be mistaken identity, it sounds like it's kind of a similar theme, where no one quite knows who's playing whom for what, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so the identity that they think they have is not the identity that's really there. Like the poor woman who's left behind knows she's not left behind. So that's really a different identity that person, that character is taking on.
Right, exactly. So it's fun.
So that's exciting. That's happening in the fall?
That's happening in the fall, yep. So we're casting the show now, and it was a lot of fun. Have people read from the script and get an idea from this. They were all having a really good time with it, too.
Well, speaking of having people audition, before the show here in the green room, we were talking about another event, a fundraiser that you're going to be having sometime in the spring. I realize the date is yet to be decided, but you talked about when people come in and try out for a part, sing for a part, you can guess what kind of voice they have just by looking at the size and shape of their body. I find that fascinating.
I mean, it sounds really silly, but I mean, that old thing, well, it's not over till the fat lady sings. Weight has nothing to do with this. I just want to remove that from the beginning, but it's really physics. I mean, truly.
It's sort of, body structure is very similar to instrument structure.
Like
a bassoon is going to sound a certain way. A clarinet is going to sound something different. An oboe is going to sound something different again. And just those little small changes alters the outcome. So when you see a particular person come and audition for you, as they walk in the door, you sort of expect a certain sound to come out of their mouth. And whether
are you usually right, or are you surprised?
We seem to be right more often than wrong.
Right.
Okay.
And I'd say, if this was baseball, we'd be in the Hall of Fame because we're batting over 500.
Yeah, remember, baseball, you only have to be right 1/3 of the time.
Right,
And you're a
That's
great
right.
hitter,
That's right.
So
Right, that's
it's a
totally
little different
acceptable.
stat there.
But yeah, I think that if they are not singing what we expect them to sing, they will be, because we're dealing mostly with emerging professionals. So people who have come out of school and have been in the field a couple of years. They haven't been doing it for 10, 15 years. And voices tend to mature. Women by 30, generally, men by 35. So you're building gradually to that, but there are certainly early indications, I guess, based on physics. And I don't know that a lot of people follow that philosophy. We put that together a number of years ago, and it's been pretty accurate.
Well, and you were talking about how people sometimes, especially when they're young, don't really know quite what category their voice is in.
Right.
And they may try to do things that are really outside the range where they sound best.
Well, and part of that is because they're still in the developing stages.
So the voice hasn't really settled into a
That's
particular-
correct.
And sometimes you can change, like
can change.
Using you as an example. If he could have been a tenor or he could have been a baritone. It depended when he started training and how he started training and how far developed his voice was. And he chose baritone. But if he'd started, I don't know.
Well, I chose baritone because I started training later in life. And it would have been a little more difficult for me to pursue the tenor range than it was for the baritone range. Plus, we also wanted to see where it wanted to naturally fall. Because if you try to push things too quickly into one direction, you cause damage, and you don't want to do that to your voice.
Now, damage, you mean physical damage?
Physical damage to your voice.
So your vocal cords can be harmed in some way that, is it irreparable, or can it be?
Well,
It will
it
limit you.
It will limit you.
Or
Yeah,
it
I'm
will
not going to
take
say it's
longer to
irreparable.
recover. Yeah.
But
I would-
you may not get to the level that you want to be long term, if this is what you're trying to do from a career standpoint.
I would put it akin to you buy a new car, and they say to kind of break it in over the first 5,000 miles or whatever.
Usually 1,000, but
Whatever. So the first 1,000, and if you go out and decide you're going to drag race in Lake County, with it and do 100 miles an hour, you're probably going to have some engine
Lasting
effect
damage, right.
that you don't know. You
Right.
know? So it's the same kind of thing. If you drive it too hard, too fast, too early, you may cause the outcome, the overall spectrum to be limited.
So one of the interesting topics that I see is we see on, of course, you see these exceptions always on TV or on YouTube, the young phenoms, the 7-year-old girl who can sing like an adult, the boy who can play the blues when he's 8 years old, and he sounds like Buddy Guy, and you see, I mean, you can see these things on YouTube, right? They're out
Right.
there. So what's going on there? I mean, are they risking damage, or as they get older, they'll change? What do they expect of their future? What should they expect?
Well, when you get somebody that young, again, their voice is still developing. What you hear right now is unbelievable. Certainly far beyond what the typical sound is for that age group. And that, again, is just, it's based on the body's physics, where they're able to create sound without trying to manipulate sound, but it just comes out a certain way. Now, long term, hard to say what the outcome is going to be.
You can't
Because-
really predict.
Because especially if you're that young, your head changes, your body changes, your
Absolutely.
lung capacity changes, the size of you in various different aspects
Well, it's-
changes, right?
It's the same thing. Because the voice is part of your body, which is not a set size and shape, to your point. It doesn't have physical, dimensional restrictions. If you gain 100 pounds, your voice is going to change. If you lose 100 pounds, your voice is going to change. If you get pregnant, your voice is going to change. I mean, it's not clear cut, but likely it will occur in some fashion. So how you adjust to it is different. How you breathe is suddenly different at, 100 pounds more or 100 pounds less because of the capacity that,
Sure.
the gravity or whatever that's on your physics. So
Now, could someone, and Steve, you talked about the fact that you could have been a tenor or a baritone at some point. You had kind of a choice of going either way. But I'm sure once you commit to a path, then you train yourself in a certain way, and later it would be very hard to change, right?
Yes.
But is there, how much flexibility is there normally in a person's voice? So would someone who, at the age of 19, for example, can sing bass, could that person actually go up to a tenor, or is there...
Probably not to a tenor, but they could certainly move up to a baritone. And that does happen probably more often than you would think, because when your voice first changes, it's a huge hormonal change. Voice drops. I mean, you
We're
go
talking about guys here, right?
Guys here, yeah.
Right.
You go to bed
Yeah.
one night. Good night, Mom. And you wake up the next morning. Morning, Mom.
Yes, it is sudden,
Yeah.
as we all know, right?
Sometimes it's very sudden. Some people have a very gradual change. But when you have that dramatic change, you're dealing with all sorts of new things. Body is trying to readjust, trying to figure out what it wants to do long term. It doesn't know yet. So you have to give it time. You can't start rushing into things. And through vocal training, will determine where it wants to sit most comfortably. So that's why, even though you may come out sounding like a very, very deep bass at age 19, maybe by the time you're 25, 26, you've brought that range that's set down here up some without necessarily losing your bottoms, but you've stretched the tops, and it's such a warm, full sound at the top that you're much more comfortable up there.
And that would be a natural progression. You talk about settling into the natural range where you feel most comfortable.
Right.
Right, and that would be something that, as you say, it would develop over time, and you would find that through training and experimentation? Is that really how-
Through training, and I highly recommend finding a very good voice teacher. And there are plenty of them out there. You just have, the one thing I would point out is find somebody who works for you. Not every teacher is for every student.
I think that's kind of good rule of thumb for any endeavor, right? There are going to be people
Right.
who coach you who understand you
Right.
and may not understand you, right?
Exactly.
Now, before the show, we were talking about, and we think about these ranges, that there is the German word was Fach.
Fach. It's
Yes.
F-A-C-H.
F-A-C-H, yes.
Just
Be
wondered
careful how we say
how we
that,
say that,
especially on
exactly,
TV, right?
exactly.
But it's you can explain it.
It's a
this-
classification system, basically, and it's used more widely in Europe than it is here in the States, but they use the terminology a lot. It's basically a classification that deals with vocal range, so note to note, how far can you go, agility, like how quickly and can
how
you move.
easily, smoothly.
How quickly? Well, smoothly is another aspect, but agility is like some voices are meant to go diddle 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 diddle, and sort of da 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 da. You know, it's some of them are more deliberate and some of them are more flourishy, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's also the weight of the voice, and you'll see the weight of the voice is like almost how cavernous it can be in a certain space. So the lyric opera seats 3,500 seats. They don't use microphones. I don't know if you've noticed their advertising campaign, but they don't use microphones. So can you fill the 3,500 seats with your voice? Or are you more suited to a 500-seat house, which is more typical in Europe? Okay, so the weight of the voice is part of it. And then the color is the other thing. And the color is kind of what we were talking about. If you were going to put it akin to an orchestral instrument, so you can kind of get that timbre and the resonance and the that kind of quality. So is it more of a reedy kind of a quality, or is it more of a brassy kind of a quality to it? And we've done comparisons with voices, like some directors we've worked with. If they're not musicians, they're stage directors. They don't really understand what the difference is and how do you promote a soprano versus an alto. Can you cast them in the same role? Well, no.
They don't know that.
They don't know that, right.
They,
Sure,
they,
they look
they,
the
they
same.
go on the assumption, well, if you can sing anything.
Exactly.
It doesn't always work that
And
way.
it doesn't work that way.
Sure.
But when you look at it, say, well, okay, so would you picture that a trombone and a piccolo could produce that same? Well, no, of course not. Well, that's the
Okay.
same thing with physics. So you kind of go after it that way. So it's the same kind of a thing. So that classification system runs across the whole board. So where
And there are tons of little slices
there,
of this, right?
yeah, there are
Yes.
tons of slices, and you can go to Wikipedia and look at all the fancy little German terms that they have on there. But it's really, instead of like soprano, alto, tenor, bass, which you have in choir, you can slice each one of these things up into these sub-dimensions that are going to classify based on those things. And what happens is those classifications generally say which kind of role in opera you should sing. And they do that specifically in the German houses because they want to, they ask you what your Fach is because they don't want to push you too
Outside
fast.
that range,
Like we were
right.
talking about
Right.
revving the engine at the wrong time.
Or find, I mean, even if you think of popular singers, singers pick their material very carefully.
Yes.
Because they have to pick something that is suited to their voice, right? So why would opera be any different?
Exactly, exactly. So there are certain things like, and you can have multiple Fachs, okay? I think you do, don't you? No, not so
Not
much.
really.
I have two that I work in, and they're different enough, but it has to do more with like one aspect of the classification. You know, it has to do with the weight versus the range. So it's all within the same range, but one of them is up here and one of them is down here. So this role of Despina, for instance, is one of those down there. Queen of the Night, which is way up in the stratosphere, is up here. They're often sung by the same kind of Fach, or similar. They could be done in certain houses. So,
I find this fascinating, by the way, that there's such gradations. Well, but of course, in any endeavor, there if you think of this, talking about physics and body physics, you can make some sort of comparison to athletics. It may sound like a stretch, but you're using your body in a certain way. And in any given sport, there are people who are suited to certain positions. And they
Absolutely.
play
Exactly.
that position really well. You move into another position, it may not be so good. And there are the rare people who can play multiple positions, but generally you're best at one.
Exactly.
Right? Or even musicians. There are many musicians who are multi-instrumentalists,
Mm-hmm.
but there's one they come home to, generally.
Exactly.
Right.
So we often say, well, yes, you have the range, you can sing it, but should you? That's really what it comes down to. So if it's not playing to all of your strengths, you probably shouldn't. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying these on, but if I go to an audition and say, I'm a dramatic soprano, which is a very big, flexible voice, can I hit the notes? Yes. You put me next to somebody who really is a dramatic soprano,
There's
no
a
comparison.
world of
And
difference.
they
Yeah.
laugh her off the stage.
Exactly. I mean,
And
so
no one wants to be in
it's
that
fine
position,
in a
right?
concert.
Well, exactly.
It's fine in
Yeah.
a concert setting in a lot of cases. It's out of context. You're not doing it for 2 hours or whatever the case may be. You can do one piece, and we all love doing that. I mean, I'm not a Puccini singer, but I love singing Puccini. I'll do it occasionally, but I'm not going to be cast in a role, and I know that. You know,
Now, you also talked about the fundraiser, and I know it hasn't been
Yeah,
scheduled, but
yeah.
the idea of pairing these voices
Yes.
with fine wines. is that the
exactly.
idea?
So
I think that's such a cool idea.
Exactly. So that kind of speaks to the color quality to it. So think of it. If you have a real high, fast-moving soprano, which would be kind of a coloratura, it's champagne, isn't it?
Something light and bubbly.
Okay.
Light and
Sure.
bubbly,
There you
exactly.
go.
You have a bass that's like rumbly down here and real rich. It's a port, right? So the concert is called Vocal Palettes and Pairings. So we're actually saying instead of like pairing it with food, we're pairing it with voices.
That's such a great idea.
It's really fun. So
So then you have to take all of your drunken patrons and get them home safely. Is that the idea?
exactly,
Right.
somehow like that, exactly.
And if there's enough wine, maybe the audience starts singing along as well. Is that
That's part of the
is
idea.
that one of the risks?
That-
Right.
No, that's one of the
No, that's one of the
objectives.
benefits.
Ah, okay.
It's one of the objectives, actually. Yeah.
So actually, that's a fascinating idea, and I think that the idea of comparing it to something that people are more familiar with, like the idea of this wide variety of wines and what they can taste like and how you pair them with food. Here you're taking the color and palette of a voice and pairing it to roles that they can
Right,
sing.
exactly.
Right?
So I mean, the ultimate objective we've talked about is like, wouldn't it be cool if people went to their work the next day after the concert and they said, wow, I saw the best Malbec the other night. Oh, she was phenomenal, you know? It's just like,
Yeah.
it would be like creating a whole new classification and reference system. It'd be really fun.
I can just see the entire dating scene changing.
I dated the best infidel the other night.
Honey, you are a true Chardonnay. I just gotta tell you. And I only think of that because of the opera that you're going to do, the Mozart piece, where
Yeah.
it is about dating and how you
Exactly.
interact, right?
Exactly.
So yes, maybe you can work some of the wine tastings into the Mozart piece as well.
We'll have to see.
Exactly.
So if people want to know more about your shows, where should they go to find out more information?
www.petite, that's P-E-T-I-T-E, opera.org.
And so if they're looking to see, well, gee, when is this wine tasting? Because I want to drink some wine and hear some voices.
We will definitely have it up there.
It
as
will be
well.
up there and advertised, right?
Yes.
Yes. Once we confirm a date, we will post it on our website and start. Yeah.
Start doing the marketing. Start round.
Exactly. Start broadcasting it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is a fundraiser for your organization
Yes,
to
it
allow
is.
you to do bigger and better productions.
Well,
Exactly.
yes,
Right.
and particularly this upcoming production for the fall,
Right.
we know it's going to take a fair amount of
Additional funding.
additional funds.
Everything
yes.
costs money.
It
Exactly,
does.
it does.
So
Well-
what we're trying to do is just help.
Help move that along.
Help
right?
move that along.
Well, I want to
quicker.
wish you the best of luck on the
you.
fundraiser. I will hope that our viewers will all check your website and see when it is, and then we'll all join you.
Okay.
So thank you guys for
Wonderful.
coming out.
Thank you.
I
Thank
hope
you.
you'll come back again sometime soon.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can see us on Comcast Channel 19 every Saturday night at 8, and you can also find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. Till next time, thank you and good night.